Liani. Hey, congratulations on your new book. No, that's out now. Spring Harvest.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited.
I know this is a. I want to say that this is your third novel of this
Yes.
series. So it's
Yes, it's my
actually
third thriller. Very exciting.
so so we have to ask. Tell us what inspired you to write Spring Harvest this time around.
Yeah, so a couple of things. This was actually a super fun book for me. So I am the biggest book nerd and I love film and TV and I love thriller and horror. And so obviously the one type of monster that I feel like every reader and like horror thriller fan loves are vampires. And so I was super excited to finally get to write a vampire book. I've been wanting to write one forever. And really like the impetus to Spring Harvest dates back to a trip I took many, many moons ago. So before I wrote Ski Weekend and before Summer Rental, I was driving from my house in California. So I don't know how familiar you are with like the geography
To
of
talk about
California,
story.
but when you go from like I was in Northern California, San Francisco, and I was driving down to LA. And as you do that drive, you pass by this like tiny little farm town in the middle of nowhere, and it's called Gilroy. And there's these huge billboards as you're driving by Gilroy that say, Gilroy, the garlic capital of the world. And so, of course, like as a writer, I think like your imagination's always running away with you. And the first thing I thought of when I saw those billboards and I saw garlic was vampires. And so I had kind of like this crazy idea. Why would a town in the middle of nowhere grow all this garlic? And like, why would you like how would you even become known as the garlic capital of the world? And my mind started spinning and I'm like, well, what if like hundreds of years ago this town had a vampire problem? And so all of a sudden they started planting garlic and they got rid of all the vampires because now they have all the garlic. But then, and this is kind of what we were doing with as Californians, we had a bunch of like droughts and fires, and so my mind immediately goes to like a disaster scenario. What if there's a drought and all of a sudden, for the first time in like 300 years, this garlic town can no longer grow the garlic with the vampires all of a sudden come back? And so that was kind of like the whole idea for it. And I sat on this for years and years and years while I wrote, Ski Weekend and Summer Rental. And I knew the whole series is 4 standalone books, but they all take place in seasons and they all take place in different parts of the world. And so I knew like I really loved this idea and I knew I wanted to tell the story eventually. And it's so wild how this worked out because I don't know if like you know a lot about growing crops. I know absolutely nothing about farming and growing crops. And so this is still blows my mind. This actually worked out. But when I think of crops, like I don't know, I always think of fall, like fall harvest, and which wouldn't fit because I've already done, winter and summer and I'm saving fall for Halloween. So I knew it had to be a spring book. And somehow, like all the stars aligned because apparently garlic is a spring crop, which I never knew until I started researching this. It's actually a spring to summer crop. And so everything kind of just like worked out perfectly. And that's kind of how the whole storyline kind of came into play. It was worked out perfect that it was vampires. It was this garlic town story I'd wanted to tell forever. And it fit perfectly as book 3 in the order because it's spring.
That's actually pretty funny because I knew Gilroy was a garlic town. I knew there's a town just underneath, just south of there's called Salinas, and that was like
Yeah.
I want to say that's like they have like a lettuce statue or something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
So that these farm towns have their own personalities. But
I
did
do.
did you by chance had a chance a while back to stop by the Garlic Festival in Gilroy before they
So
shut it down?
I'm so bummed. I never did. And then like when I started, I kind of got distracted. Well, not distracted, but like I really put my attention into Ski Weekend and to Summer Rental. And by the time I finally was able to really turn to this book, to Spring Harvest, the Garlic Festival no longer exists. So it kind of stinks. I would have loved it. But what I did do was I spent a lot of time, like I love researching. I think we talked about I'm a trial attorney for a long time.
Mm.
And so I am a big researcher. Like I love the research part of writing. And so I did spend a lot of time like going on Google and going on Pinterest. Like I have an entire Pinterest board with like all these old pictures from the garlic festival and like all of the food stands and they've got like this big garlic guy statue. So I had all of it like image wise in my head, but I never actually got to physically go, which is a huge bummer. Maybe one day they'll reinstate it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We shall see. So, so, so your garlic festival is merged, which is kind of funny, into a music festival.
Yes.
That reminds people of like Coachella, for example. Tell us the thought process of going into that route.
So it's a couple of things. So I grew up in Florida. I was like a country girl. I kind of grew up in the middle of nowhere. And so like my experience growing up before all these big music festivals, like Coachella and all that, which I love, and I'll talk about that. But my experience was like these small, like town fairs or like town country fairs. And they would always bring in an artist. Like there would be a country performer. And then like when I moved to Texas, it was the same thing, like the state fair, they'd always have like performances in the Houston rodeo. And so I think like in my mind, there was always a tie of like this small town and like all the cool fun, you know, like the food and all the games and everything like you'll see in Spring Harvest, but also with the music and the bands and everything. And then as I got older and I moved out to California, I started to go to like Coachella and Stagecoach and Bottle Rock and Outside Lands. I kind of loved like that whole music culture. And I feel like a lot of people really enjoy festivals. There's just something really fun and exciting about, you know, going to the festival. A lot of times people camp out. And it's something you plan for, you know, months and months in advance. And so I just thought the idea of marrying this like random vampire farm town and then having these like performers, like kind of like a, you know, a big festival, just like you'd see at Coachella or whatever. I thought it was a really fun dynamic to explore. And I also thought like, what better way to get this group of friends together? Because when you think of spring, you think of spring break, and what spring break would all these, you know, 22, 23-year-olds, what would they all want to go to together during spring? And it kind of made sense now that festival season is such a huge deal and there's so many more festivals going on. It kind of seemed like a perfect trip for them to go on. And then just the visual of like this, I mean, it's kind of behind me, but like this crazy, you know, area with music and all the garlic and all of the games. And then these vampires like all of a sudden decide to attack. So I think it was just like was a really fun concept. And I think it worked out really well. And it allowed me to do really cool things at the end of the book. Like I have a playlist and then I gave out swag to people. So like they got the little Coachella type bracelets and the holographic stickers. So I think it just made it a really fun overall experience for my readers, which I'm always looking to do.
I know I'm jumping the gun about wanting to talk about your playlist. Is that the playlist that you play in the background while writing this, or this is
you know what? Some of the songs, yes. So like I've got a Cure song on there, The Forest, which I absolutely played in the background because it's such a cool, like creepy vibe. But a lot of them are actually just pieces, like songs that kind of make sense for parts of the book. Like there's a Taylor Swift song because in the beginning of the book, as they're driving, Alix, the main character, is just dumped her boyfriend Logan of a while. And he's, you know, kind of like this golden retriever, cute guy that's sulking, listening to Taylor Swift. And then there's when they're getting ready for the concert, they're all listening to Britney Spears. And so some songs are like that, like they're literally taken from moments in time during the book. But then some are also just like atmospheric stuff that I really enjoy, like The Cure.
That's wonderful to hear. Now, you create themes for each of your
I
novels.
do.
So tell us about the theme that we should be looking out for with Spring Harvest this time.
I do. That's actually one of my favorite things. So like my main thing in writing is I love to entertain readers and I love to help people escape. I had a lot of issues when I was like a child, and for me reading was such a wonderful escape, and it still is today. So I like to try to write these very fun, exciting page turning books people can escape into, but at the same time, and I know we talked about this before, like it's really important to me to really leave an impact on my readers and have something for them to kind of walk away with if they want to. So I never want to be preachy and I never want to be like too in your face, but I do think, you know, part of our responsibility as human beings on this planet is to try and leave the world a little bit better if we can. And so every single one of my books, I try and put in something, some kind of underlying theme that if you're paying attention, you'll pick up on it. that is important to me, and that I think is good for people to chat about. Whichever way you come down on the issue, I think it's good for some, people to think about it. And for vampires, for me, it just seemed like a perfect book to explore the way that we treat animals, and especially factory farming. It's something that is really near and dear to me. I've always been a huge animal lover. When I was like a young kid, I volunteered at the Humane Society all throughout high school. I've done as an attorney. I did tons of pro bono work for the Humane Society. I did lobbying in Texas against anti-tethering, which is where they, leash the dogs and leave them outdoors. So for me, it's always been like a big part of my life to try and help with animal welfare issues. And I just thought, like, I don't want to give too much away about the book, but when you think of vampires and how they, live off of people and how they might contain those people to live off of them, I think there's like a natural, at least in my mind, connection between how do we live off of our food supply, like our animal creature food supply, and what obligation might we owe these animals. And I didn't want to get too preachy, and I don't think it is, hopefully. And I don't go into like eating meat or not eating meat or whatever, but it's more just like to think about, if you are going to eat meat, how do we care for the meat? And how do we care for the animals? And I think honestly, I think it's a super important conversation. And I think it was like kind of fun to tie it in. And I think people really get it when they see the way the humans are treated by the vampires. I think it's a very real, visceral metaphor to how we treat animals.
Yeah, I do actually find it interesting because you went down the same path as Bram Stoker when he wrote Dracula.
Yeah.
Because he created the entire idea of the vampire system as unsafe sex and the spread of syphilis at that time of his.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah, so the entire vampire lore that Bram Stoker created was if you reread it, it is all about unsafe sex and spreading the disease. And then that's because during his time, it was because unsafe sex was spreading syphilis. And
no way. I love that. This is why I love horror and thriller as a genre, because I feel like it's always such a cool way to explore different themes in society without being too over, I think, hitting people over the head with things. Then you can do it in this genre that you can't do in other genres. That's so cool. I did not know that.
Yeah, so if you ever pick up the Dracula book, now think back that it's
syphilis
about syphilis and unsafe
and STDs as I read it.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a whole different meaning.
Yeah, and then you will totally understand where he comes from with his entire story of Dracula.
Oh, it's so cool. Okay, thank you for sharing that. I actually had no idea.
No, that's okay. When I was actually reading your book, I actually thought it was lycanthropes and animals getting revenge.
Oh, I love that. That's actually awesome. That's very cool.
Yeah. So I know you've been Florida, you've been in Texas, you've been in California. Tell us about the setting in Oregon this time around. I mean,
you know what? I've never been to Oregon. I hate to say that. That's like literally the worst confession when you're writing a book, because everywhere else I've written so far, I've not only been, but I've spent like huge chunks of my life there. I haven't spent any time in Oregon ever. So I hope I haven't completely like insulted anyone who lives in Oregon and they're like, that's not what Oregon's like. But I did, again, I spent a ton of time researching it. So I think I did it justice. And I really wanted it to kind of emulate sort of the farm town in Northern California anyway, which I think is very similar. But I really had to write, because the vision for the 4 books is they're different seasons in different regions. And so I knew I had to do like that region. And so it just fit. And I just wrote it. This was like a much faster project for me. So I didn't really have time to go to Oregon. I wish like one day I will make it, but I don't have any value to add about Oregon other than this really was like my vision of everything I've experienced in California and all the California farm towns, and kind of just picking it up and putting it in Oregon and how I think it would go. And I know that I know it all fits geographically. Like I did all the research. I know it's all accurate, but I can't say I actually went there physically. Whereas the other ones, I mean, summer rental was so easy because I grew up in Florida and I spent, my whole life in Miami and in on the Keys in islands and peninsulas and stuff. So that for me was like so easy to write, and the culture of being a Floridian and not caring about hurricanes. And then ski weekend also for me, even though I never had snow until I moved to California, once I got to California, I spent so much time. We had a little condo in Tahoe. And so I spent, when I was writing ski weekend, I was literally writing it sitting in the condo. But yeah, Oregon, not so much. And the worst part is the fourth book, I already know it's going to be like in New England because I'm dying to write a book in New England. And the only time I've ever spent in New England was Nantucket, which I don't think really fits this. So now I think you've inspired me. Now I think I need a trip. I'm gonna have to go somewhere this fall in New England and stay there for like at least a week so I can say I went there.
Well, you're gonna have to write it off as a research trip.
I know.
For sure.
You know what? It's actually been a dream. I don't know if you've ever been to Salem. It's been a dream, like a bucket list dream of mine to go to Salem in October. So maybe I'll do it this year.
Well, that would certainly fit the theme of your next book. Now, here's a big question, and I'm pretty sure people have asked you before. Does all your books fit in the same universe, or do you see them as separate?
Nope, they're all the same universe. And in fact, I'm thinking of ways to tie in the fourth book, like little bits, a little bit more in from each of the concluding 3 books before, and kind of wrap it around in like a little pretty bow. But yeah, no, they're all in the same universe. In fact, they all make little references. Like in Summer Rental, there's some references to Mount Sierra. In Spring Harvest, there's references to both Mount Sierra and also Palm Key Island. And so they're not at the same time period. Mm-hmm. So they all follow like a linear time period. So ski weekend takes place first, then Summer Rental, then Spring Harvest, but they are all the same universe.
So you already have all this mapped out. Is it just 4 books, or are you going beyond 4 books? Is
just 4 books, although it's like the biggest feedback I've gotten from Spring Harvest, and I feel really bad. I did not know this would be the reaction, but almost everyone who's read it is like angry of the ending and wants there to be a sequel, which is kind of crazy. I was talking to someone else about this, and I'm really familiar, and I know that you're like a real aficionado of foreign thriller, and I feel like I'm pretty familiar as well with like genre expectations. And I thought, because this is a thriller, I mean, it's right above my head, it's a thriller. Thriller and horror, there's really not as many rules. You can kind of end a book however you want if it fits the story. But because there's a romance subplot, I did not know that this was going to happen, but people got super invested, which is great. I mean, it's a great thing for a writer, but to the point where like they're a little bit angry that there's no sequel to this one. And so in my mind, there's only 4 books, but I'm trying to figure a way to because I want to make my readers happy, to kind of wrap up the ending a little bit more to what I think they really want. And I don't know if that's going to be on book 4, if I'm going to do kind of like a little standalone.
You could always do like a little novella, short story, like that. It's sort of like something in between the seasons.
I've been playing with that, and my husband, who's amazing, and he helps me with a lot of ideas, but he's like dying for me to write a novella about leap year. So that's also kind of in my mind. He's like, you're doing all these seasons, like do leap year, like that's such a cool concept. So I don't know, maybe there'll be some novellas, but 4 main books.
Wow. That is actually pretty awesome. Now, in your mind, because you use the term thriller and horror interchangeably, it's like the same genre, and a lot of people don't see that as the same thing.
I'm very controversial. You know what it is, to be honest? I think that in a lot of ways, it's a little bit like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think there's so much like I don't know if it's misunderstanding, or just like people have such strong feelings when they hear horror, and such like misconceptions as to what it actually is. And so I hesitate sometimes calling any of my books horror, because I feel like that's going to turn off a large readership of people that actually don't understand what horror is or what horror can be. Like for example, Silence of the Lambs, like I think you and I would probably definitely call that horror. knowing kind of like the constructs of the genre, but it's becomes, I mean, it won an Oscar, which never happens in horror, other than maybe Get Out, which also I think a lot of people don't know that's horror and they think it's a thriller. And so I think I say it like very carefully because I'm trying not to scare people away that I think will enjoy my stories. And then also people have weird conventions. Like to me, when I think of Spring Harvest, I think it's clearly horror. It's vampires, they're killing people, like it's scary or whatever. But then a lot of people read it and people who are really into horror, and they're like, oh no, it's a thriller. Like it's not, I wasn't scared. And so people put their own definition on what they think horror is. So I just like to do it very loosely because I think academically you could almost argue anything other than there's like obviously Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? Like that's horror. Like no one's going to say that's not horror. When you get into more like cerebral type stories, or things that are not so in your face, maybe more mental horror, I think people sometimes get confused or don't really know what way to classify it. And so I don't want to make that classification for my readers. I don't want to turn people off that I think might enjoy. And I don't want horror readers to pick up my books and then be pissed off because they're like, oh, I don't, this is too much of a thriller. Like I thought this was going to be a terrifying horror. And so I like to use them interchangeably and let people pick them up and then they can tell me what they think. Because at that point, it's up to them. They're not the reader. If they want to call it horror, great. If they want to say it's a thriller, they want to say it's a romantic thriller, awesome. I just want people to read and I don't want to scare them off one way or the other. And I don't want to mismatch their expectations.
Well said, well said. So how do you interact with your fans and when they give you like a feedback?
I love them. I love my fans. I love on them. I think that it's so, to me, I know not every author is like this, but to me, probably one of the greatest joys of writing is being able to entertain people and to connect with the readers in the community. And I really just want to have like a really nice open relationship with my readers. And so I always invite them, like in the back of my books, on my social media, contact me, send me a DM, email me. I'd love to hear from you. I like to hear your thoughts about my books. I like to hear your thoughts about other books. I just really want to build like a really nice, safe, healthy community of people who love books, hopefully love my books as well. I take all feedback and I listen to it as much as I can. I'm not necessarily going to change my stories or change the way that I write, but I definitely listen to it. And like I said, I have heard all the feedback on Spring Harvest and everyone that wants like a different kind of ending. And I think I will figure a way to give them that because I think that's important. And I really want to make my readers happy. Like that's, one of the number one things I do. Like I write because I can't think of any other way that I want to live my life because I love it so much. But if I was only about writing, I would write and put it in a drawer and no one would ever see it. For me, the other biggest part of writing is really to like make people happy, and to give them an entertainment and escape and to really build up community. It's funny because someone I really love that I think does this so amazing is Taylor Swift. And like, whether you love her or you hate her, you can't deny that the way she's built up her community is really something unbelievable. And as a businesswoman, I always look to that to, see like, how has she done it? And that's something really similar to what I want to do as well.
Well said, well said. Well, I've taken a lot of your time already, and I'm trying to piece together already on the hints that you gave out on the next book. Fall, Halloween, New England. We
better talk about that when the next book comes out. I want to talk to you again because I feel like now you're on the journey with me.
Right? I mean, it is very awesome. But I do have one small critique though.
Tell me.
Okay. Here's my copy of the book.
Yes.
And your background has bats, and I don't see bats on.
What?
Or is it? Or is it like too
Are they just
small?
Tiny?
Oh, you know what? There
better be some
tiny.
bats on that.
I was gonna say,
I'm gonna have to speak to the printer.
I was gonna say
maybe they're just bigger on my background.
All these hints that you put on the cover.
I love covers. So, I don't know if you can tell. I really like covers, and I like to put little crazy hints on them.
Oh, then there you go. Then I guess we can't wait until your next book in the fall. What? How about this? When do we expect that next book?
It's gonna be a little bit. October 2025.
Okay.
So I'm taking a little bit of time. So ski weekend is now kind of moving along in pre-production. So I want to be able to give some attention to the film. And summer rental also, we're trying to work on getting that into a film state. And so I want to allow some time to do the movie aspect as well. And I want to go kind of slow with the fourth book because it's the last one. But October or September, so Halloweenish time, 2025. So not this fall, but the following fall.
Sounds great.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, everything goes smooth.
You know what? I'm just going to follow you just to watch you, just to take a trip to New England because I want to see your reaction.
So funny. You're the first one. You're the first one to call me out on this, and I'm like, damn, I cannot have this conversation for book 4. I've got to because everyone else, all the other authors are like, oh yeah, I took all this time off and I wrote a book in Italy, so I went to Italy for 3 months. I'm like, I didn't do that, so I think I'm gonna have to go to Boston or somewhere in New England for at least 2 weeks.
You should definitely do that. You could always contact me about Salem. For some unknown reason, I took an entire college semester on the economics of the Salem witch trials.
Oh my God, I love that.
So we wasn't talking about the mysticism of it. It talks about what actually, happened and why it was all pure greed. And then
100%.
Yeah. So
that's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. You're giving me some ideas.
I went into the practical side of what the humans actually did.
Yeah.
rather than the witchcraft side of
like
the Arthur Miller Crucible,
Yeah. No, that's really cool. That's actually very interesting.
So anyways, thank you very much for speaking to us, and really thank you for the autograph somewhere.
Oh, you're welcome.
So
thank you for all your support. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to talk to you about the next book when it's out.
Yeah, we will do that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.